saw you, but you probably already blocked me, so I was just like,
Okay.
no.
I think you've got enough time to chat. Now we should start. So today I will start the immune system, immunity, which is the defensive functions of your body. You know that human body has the ability to resist, right, against any foreign invaders like microorganisms, bacteria or virus, right? So that ability is called immunity, or ability to fight against the microorganisms or antigens. Okay. The system in your body which is responsible for immunity, mainly responsible for immunity, is the lymphatic system. Okay. So first we'll talk about the lymphatic system. We'll see the parts of the lymphatic system. Then we'll talk about the lymphatic vessels. Then the main warriors of your lymphatic system are T and B cells. These two components, T cells or T lymphocytes and B cells or B lymphocytes, they are the main warriors or fighters against the antigens. So we'll talk about them. Then we'll talk about lymphoid tissue and follicles. In lymph organs, you have a number of lymph organs in the body. The lymphatic system are filled with follicles where T cells, B cells and other components are present heavily. So we'll talk about the follicles. Then we'll talk about the lymph organs, spleen, tonsils, thymus. Then we'll talk about a couple other structures, Peyer's patches and lacteals. So first, the parts of the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system consists of lymph nodes, lymph nodes are small round structures widely distributed throughout the lymphatic system, throughout the body. Okay? But in some locations, the lymph nodes are clustered. For example, in your neck, axillary area, right? Inguinal area. So when you go to see your doctor, sometimes you'll see they quickly check like this, right? So those are the locations where the lymph nodes are clustered. Okay? And if any infection occurs in the body, lymph nodes can get enlarged, right? Swelling of the lymph node can occur. So lymph nodes are small, round, and many in number throughout the body. Other lymph organs include thymus, which is only one here in the upper part of your thorax, tonsils, and spleen. So these are the other lymph organs. They are only few and larger. Lymph nodes are solely responsible for immunity. Other organs, these organs, are responsible for immunity, but they have other functions too. Make sense? You remember two organs are called the graveyards for red blood cells, spleen and liver, right? So you see spleen has other function too. So these are the lymph organs. Then you have lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic system is like your circulatory system. It has blood. It has lymphatic vessels like blood vessels, and inside the vessels you have the fluid. That is the lymphatic. Okay, so lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic vessels include capillaries, lymphatic capillaries, collecting ducts or collecting vessels, then you have trunks and ducts. So small to large, okay? From the capillaries, the fluid enters into the collecting vessels, and from the collecting vessels pass through the trunks and then goes to the ducts, okay? And the fluid is called lymphatic fluid. Okay? So these are the parts of your lymphatic system. Lymph organs, small and many, those are the lymph nodes, and large and few, those are other organs, thymus, tonsils, spleen. You have lymphatic vessels, capillaries, collecting vessels, trunks, ducts, and the fluid inside the system. That is the lymphatic fluid, which is a kind of, whitish fluid. Okay, so now from where that fluid enters into the lymphatic system. If you see the lymphatic capillaries are actually not like blood capillaries. You remember blood capillaries form capillary bed, remember that network? But lymphatic capillaries don't form network. Capillaries end like this, separately, okay? And blind ended. They are not connected like blood capillaries, not like this. They are what? Blind ended or dead ended, okay? So not connected to other capillaries like this. So these are lymphatic capillaries, and these are the cells in the tissue. Okay? So you have capillaries in the tissue, and in between the tissue, the fluid is called interstitial fluid. You know that, in between the cells. Interstitial fluid. So this is tissue. Okay? And this is lymph capillary. Okay? So lymph capillaries are dead-ended. They don't form network or bed. In the wall of lymph capillary, you have mini valves. They open only inwards. So the valves only open inwards, not outwards, okay, like this. So when the pressure in the interstitial fluid increases, what happens? The fluid enters into the lymphatic capillary. Okay? So that pressure will open the valve, which way? Inwards, right? So the fluid will get into the capillary. Make sense? And that interstitial fluid is the lymph fluid. So basically, lymph fluid is the interstitial fluid that enters from the tissue to the capillary. But that fluid cannot get out because the valve only opens inwards If it tries to get out, it will get closed. Okay? So these are the mini valves. So mini valves. Make sense? So that's how the fluid enters into the lymphatic system. Now, in your tissue, if any bacteria or virus is present here, that fluid will take those microorganisms into the lymphatic vessels. Make sense? Lymphatic capillaries. With the fluid, those microorganisms will also enter into the lymphatic system. Make sense? Which is the main purpose. So continuously fluid is getting in from the tissue, and if there is any microorganism there, many of them will enter into the lymphatic circulation. Okay? Another thing, the lymph capillaries are attached to the tissue by filaments. Okay. So filaments attach the capillaries to the tissue, so will not move a lot. Okay. So those are few things you need to know about the lymphatic capillary or lymph capillary. Blind-ended or dead-ended, has mini valves open inwards, and the filaments anchor the, make sense? Filaments anchor the capillaries to the tissue, adjacent tissue. So here you see the green capillaries are lymphatic capillaries, and you know this is the blood capillary bed. Both are present in the tissue, right? And you see, this is the end of the lymph capillary. These are the valves, filaments, okay, and dead-ended. Now, from the capillaries, then the lymph fluid will enter into the collecting vessels here. From the capillaries, the lymph will enter into the collecting vessels. You see inside that box, collecting vessels. Then will pass through the trunks. And finally, the fluid will be given to the ducts. And ducts are the largest lymphatic vessels. Make sense? Because they are the last ones. So, the ducts will collect the fluid. There are two ducts in our body, in our lymphatic system. Right lymphatic duct, and another one very important, that is the thoracic duct. Okay? So these are two largest lymphatic vessels that collect the lymph finally. And right lymphatic duct is smaller than the thoracic duct. Thoracic duct is much larger than the right lymphatic duct. So, now look at this picture and look all the way to the top. Lymphatic duct. Then from the lymphatic ducts, the lymph will enter into the subclavian vein. Subclavian vein. Make sense? So, lymph fluid is finally going to the vein. That means into the blood. Make sense? Which vein? Subclavian vein. Now let's go back to the capillaries. Okay, look at this. Interstitial fluid enters into the capillaries, then that fluid circulates through the collecting vessels, trunks, as well as the fluid passes through these lymphatic organs, because lymphatic organs are along the lymphatic vessels. And then finally we'll go to the ducts. Two lymphatic ducts, right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct, will drain the fluid lymph into where? The subclavian vein. Okay? That means into the blood. Now, probably you know that this is the blood capillary network. Okay? So what happens, you see this is interesting. This is the capillary bed, blood is here. So the fluid comes out from the blood capillary is the interstitial fluid. So from the blood capillary, secretion of fluid occurs, and that is the interstitial fluid, and from there it enters into the lymphatic circulation. Make sense? So from blood capillaries, fluid gets out, enters into the tissue, right? That is the interstitial fluid. Then that fluid enters into the lymphatic system, circulates inside the lymphatic system, make sense? And then enters again into the blood, subclavian vein, right? And then from that blood, it goes to the capillary, blood capillary, secreted in the interstitial fluid again, make sense? So it's circulating again and again inside the blood circulation, inside the lymphatic circulation. Make sense? Okay. So that is being happening in your body, and every time if there is any new microorganism or antigen, it will be taken into the lymphatic system and will be destroyed inside the lymphatic system. That's the reason why the fluid is entering, because those microorganisms will enter here, will be destroyed inside the lymphatic system, because inside the lymphatic system you have these organs, right? And they are heavily filled with T cells, B cells, and other, fighters. They are waiting there to destroy it. Okay? So that's how the lymphatic system and circulatory system, blood circulation, work together. Okay. Now, if I ask you, tell me a few differences between the blood capillaries and lymphatic capillaries. Blood capillaries form what? Anastomosis network, right? That is called the capillary bed. In case of lymphatic capillaries, they don't form anastomosis. They are dead-ended, blind-ended, right? And in case of blood capillaries, we don't have the valves, right? In case of lymphatic capillaries, you have mini valves, one way, opens inwards, right? You have filaments that anchor the lymphatic capillaries to the surrounding tissue. Now, lymphatic vessels are similar to the veins, except the wall of lymphatic capillaries is thinner than the blood veins. The wall of lymphatic vessels, not capillaries, the wall of lymphatic vessels is thinner than the veins. And they have more valves inside. You know that veins have valves, we talked about that before. But in case of lymphatic vessels, the number of valves is more. Lymphatic vessels anastomotes more frequently. We are not talking about lymphatic capillaries. Lymphatic capillaries don't anastomose, but lymphatic vessels anastomose. So if this is one lymphatic vessel, this is another lymphatic vessel, often they are connected. In case of vein, you don't see that. Okay. In case of lymphatic vessels, you have many valves, more than the veins. Okay. Okay. Now there are two sets of lymphatic vessels: superficial and deep. The superficial lymphatic vessels run with the superficial veins, and deep lymphatic vessels run with the arteries. You know, arteries are located in the deeper part of the body. Veins are more superficial. So there are two sets of lymphatic vessels. Make sense? One set runs with the veins, superficial veins, and another set run with the arteries. Okay, so how many lymphatic ducts we have? Anybody? Two. Right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct. Remember that? Which one is bigger? Which one is bigger? Thoracic is much bigger, right? That's what I said a few minutes ago. Okay. So, since thoracic duct is bigger than right lymphatic duct, 3/4 part of your body gives the fluid lymph into the thoracic duct. Make sense? So from 3/4 part, that means from about 75% body part, the fluid enters into what? The thoracic duct, because that one is bigger. Make sense? And 1/4 part or quadrant gives the lymph into the right lymphatic duct. Now look at me. If I divide my body into 4 quadrants like this and this, okay, this way, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? From right, upper right quadrant, that means half of my head, right half of my head, right half of my neck, right? Right half of my chest or thorax, and upper right limb. From these areas, lymph will enter into the right lymphatic duct. Make sense? And from 3/4 quadrant, that means enter bottom part, right? And upper left part, the fluid will enter into the thoracic duct. So only from upper right quadrant into the right lymphatic duct. From rest part of the body into the thoracic duct. Make sense? If you see the thoracic duct, you can easily find the thoracic duct in the body. If you go to cadaver lab, you can also have a look. Thoracic duct rests on the vertebral column like this, okay? Like this. So it is easy to find. And the lower end of thoracic duct is expanded, wider, dilated. So if you see the thoracic duct, which rests on the vertebral column, you will see the lower end is wider, and that is called cisterna chyli. Okay, so here, this is the thoracic duct, and the lower end, you see the dilated or expanded lower end, which is called what? Cisterna chyli. And why this lower end is wider? Because what happens from the lower part of your body, like the lower limbs, lymph enters into the cisterna chyli. So several lymphatic vessels give the lymph, that fluid, here. So it is collecting fluid from the lower part of the body. Okay? And then it goes towards the subclavian vein. So now look at this. This is the cisterna chyli collecting lymph from a number of vessels from the lower part of the body, and then going to give the lymph to the left subclavian vein. Remember the subclavian vein under the clavicle? So on the left side. And right thoracic duct right lymphatic duct is here, and it will give the lymph into the right subclavian vein, where the subclavian vein, this is the subclavian vein and this is the internal jugular vein. You must remember brachiocephalic vein, right? Divides into two. Internal jugular going towards the head, right? And subclavian under the clavicle. So just where the subclavian vein begins, the ducts enter there. Okay? The beginning of the subclavian vein, close to the internal jugular. So here you see by two different colors they have shown how much area is giving the lymph to which duct. So only upper right quadrant is giving to the right lymphatic duct. Here you can see more clearly, this is the thoracic duct, this is cisterna chyli, these are the lymphatic vessels giving lymph to the cisterna chyli and going to the subclavian, left subclavian vein. And this is the right lymphatic duct. Okay. Now, lymphoid cells. I mentioned two types of cells are the main warriors. Okay, T cells or T lymphocytes and B cells or B lymphocytes. Now, lymphocytes, you already know, are one type of white blood cells. But why we have two types of lymphocytes, T and B? After the lymphocytes are produced in the bone marrow, we know all blood cells come from the bone marrow. So after the lymphocytes are produced in the bone marrow, some lymphocytes stay in the bone marrow and get trained there, get their training there inside the bone marrow. Some lymphocytes go to the thymus and get their training there. Training to do what? Lymphocytes do what? Lymphocytes do what? Fight. Yeah, lymphocytes fight, right? So they learn how to fight. You know, when the young kids are recruited in army, they don't know anything how to fight, but they are trained, right? They are sent to different types of trainings that you learn this, you learn that, right? So similarly, lymphocytes, those lymphocytes are being produced in the bone marrow, they don't know how to fight. Then some of them get their training inside the bone marrow, and some of them get their training in the thymus. Make sense? And then they come out and enter into the lymphatic system. And those get their training in the bone marrow, they become what? B lymphocytes or B cells. And those get their training in thymus, they become what? T lymphocytes or T cells. Okay? And they learn different things, not same thing. Okay? T lymphocytes learn mainly to do phagocytosis. Okay? B lymphocytes mainly learn to secrete antibodies. Okay, secrete antibodies. What is phagocytosis?
Digestion of cells.
Engulf, right? You know that? Engulfing. So that is one way, right? If somebody, your enemy comes to you to fight with you, you can do what? You can grab it, right? You can grab it. That is one way, right? If you think that if you think your enemy is mightier, stronger than you, can harm you if he comes close to you, you cannot grab it, then you will do what? You will throw something, right? From far enough distance, right? Or shoot him. I hope you don't do that. But there are different ways to fight, right? So T lymphocytes let the antigens come close. Okay? But B lymphocytes do what? Secrete, release the antibodies. Antibodies go to the enemies and destroy. Okay? So they learn different techniques. Now, T lymphocytes are different types. There are different types of T lymphocytes. Cytotoxic T cells, helper T cells, suppressor T cells, and memory T cells. Okay. So there are 4 different types of T cells. What are those? Cytotoxic. Its name is telling you. It's toxic to the enemy cell, right? Cytotoxic. Helper T cells. Suppressor T cells. Suppressor T cells will suppress the immune system. We'll talk about that later, okay? That's why they are called suppressor, also called regulatory T cells. Okay? Regulate the immune function. And another is memory T cells. Okay? B lymphocytes could be memory B cells, helper B cells, and plasma cells. Okay? So those are different types of B cells. Now, all of them fight against the microorganisms or antigens. Now, what is the difference between microorganisms and antigens? Antigens is a broader term that includes microorganisms and other things. Make sense? Other harmful things. So microorganisms include what? Living organisms, right? Like bacteria, virus, fungus, right? Those are microorganisms. Microscopic organisms, living organisms, they try to invade into the body, right? And cause harm. Many microorganisms are good microorganisms. So microorganisms, most of them are good microorganisms. Okay? But when we hear microorganism, we think, oh, they will cause harm, right? Many of them are very helpful for your body. Okay? For example, in your intestine, you have E. coli, right? That help in digestion of food. Some microorganisms produce vitamin, but some cause harm. Some type of E. coli is harmful, right? So just remember that microorganisms are not always antigens. Bad microorganisms are antigens, okay? But antigens also include tumor cells, abnormal cells in your own body. Make sense? If you get tissue from another person's body, that can be also considered as antigen. Make sense? If you get blood from another person, that blood could be considered as antigen if it doesn't match, right? You know that. So, you see, antigen not only includes the microorganisms, bacteria or virus, but it also includes other things, right? For example, tumor cells, cancer cells, abnormal cells in your body, dead cells in your body, okay? And cells from another person, outsiders. So, your T cells and B cells destroy the antigens. Now, if in your body a tumor is formed, tumor cells are what? Antigens, right? So, your immune system will try to do what? Kill those cells. If any cancer cell is found in the body, your immune system, your T cells, B cells will destroy, will try to destroy. Okay? Make sense? Dead cells will be removed, okay, from the body. So all those belong to the antigens. Have you heard autoimmune disease, autoimmunity? Inside your body, auto means self, right? Inside your body, some abnormal cells are produced. And your own immune system, right, will fight against those cells. So, sometimes when they fight against those cells, they will also kill the healthy cells too. Inflammation will occur in that area. Make sense? And that can cause the death of the healthy cells too. And that is the autoimmune disease. Your own immune system is destroying your cells, own cells. Okay? And that's why you need the suppressor T cells, okay? If your immune system becomes hyperactive and you start to destroy your own body cells, right? Should be suppressed. But don't do that. That's not good. Make sense? So, suppressor T cells will suppress the overfunction of immune system. Okay? Will tell the immune system that don't overreact. Okay. Now we'll see the lymph nodes. If you see the structure of a lymph node, the outer part is called the cortex and the inner part is called the medulla. So you have in the lymph node, you have outer part, cortex, and inner part is the medulla. Outer part has structures like this. These are called follicles. And the follicles are heavily filled with lymphocytes. So these are the lymphocytes inside the follicles. So, in the cortex, you have many follicles. Those are heavily filled with lymphocytes. Okay. Now, let's see the picture. This is the cortex. This is the medulla, and these are the follicles filled with what? Lymphocytes. Okay. And you see here the number of vessels, lymphatic vessels, bring the fluid inside the lymph node is more than the number of vessels take the fluid out. Make sense? So more lymphatic vessels are getting in, bringing the fluid in, and less vessels taking the fluid out. Make sense? So what will happen? Fluid will stay for longer time. Make sense? More is getting in, but getting out slowly. So the fluid will remain longer, which is very important for the lymphocytes to separate the antigens, the microorganisms or antigens, and destroy them. More time the fluid will circulate inside the lymph node, right? It will work better to separate the antigens and destroy them. If it enters quickly and gets out quickly, many of the microorganisms will escape easily, but that will not happen inside the lymph node. And the valves here, you see, open one way. That means the fluid can get in this way and get out that way, but cannot get back. Make sense? Which is important. Like once the fluid is cleaned up, then it should not get back and get mixed with bad fluid. Okay. Spleen, another lymph organ. Spleen, if you see inside the spleen, you will see two types of structures, red pulps and white pulps. Some areas are red colored, those are called the red pulps, and some areas are whitish, white pulp. If you cut the spleen and see without microscope, you can see those areas, okay? Red areas, red pulp, and white areas, kind of shiny white, white pulp, okay? Now, inside the spleen, this is the splenic artery that enters, already the splenic artery. Do you remember splenic artery? Gastric, splenic, and hepatic from the celiac trunk tree. Okay, so splenic artery enters into the spleen and branches inside, and these are the central arteries. Around the central arteries, you have the white pulp, and these areas are red pulp areas where you have many sinuses, veins give blood into those sinuses. Sinuses are the cavities. Since blood accumulates there, venous blood, but remember here they have shown by blue, but blood is not blue, right? Blood is red. So these areas are filled with what? Blood. These sinuses are filled with blood. So that area looks white. That area looks what? Red, because a lot of blood accumulates in the sinuses. So two areas inside the spleen. Spleen is mainly responsible for lymphocyte proliferation. That means multiplication. The lymphocytes increase in number according to the need of the body. If your immune system thinks that you need more lymphocytes to fight against the microorganisms inside the spleen, proliferation of lymphocytes will occur. Okay? Also, immune surveillance, monitoring and responding. Spleen removes the old blood cells. We already know it is also called graveyard for blood cells. So, old blood cells enter into the spleen and are destroyed there. Inside the spleen, you will find many lymphocytes, of course, as well as macrophages and huge number of erythrocytes, because we know that inside the spleen the red blood cells are destroyed. Thymus. Thymus is located in the very upper part of your thorax, here, just bottom of the neck. In adult person, the thymus is small like this, but in early stage, if you see an infant, the thymus is very large, occupies almost whole upper part of the chest, thorax. So it's very big. Okay, and gradually the thymus shrinks, gets smaller. Why the thymus is very big in infants? What do you think?
Your innate immune system is developing.
Yeah, immune system is not yet developed in infants. Immune system takes time to get mature, okay, develop. So in very early stage of life, the immune system is very weak, and that's why thymus needs to work more. Okay, and gradually your other organs develop, tonsil, spleen, and lymph nodes. Those get matured, so you don't need the thymus in adults. So that's why it gradually shrinks. Now, inside the thymus, you have the Hessel's corpuscle, also called thymic corpuscles. If you see the tissue inside the thymus,